Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
It's great to be here.
Today we're diving into a story that has really sparked a lot of debate.
Hmm.
It's the controversy surrounding Miss Universe Africa and Oceania,
Right.
Chidimma Adetshina,
Yeah.
and it brings up all these questions about,
Yeah.
national identity, belonging, South Africa's relationship with the rest of the continent.
Absolutely.
We've got like news articles, opinion pieces, even some like historical context to kind of dig through.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to try to unpack this complex situation
Okay.
and see what it reveals about South Africa,
Yeah,
deep
I think
down.
what makes this case so interesting is that it goes beyond just like a typical beauty pageant dispute.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of forces us to look at South Africa's history
Yeah.
and how it's wrestling with its identity
Uh-huh.
on like the world stage.
Exactly. It's not just about a crown, is it?
No.
So for those who haven't been following the story super closely,
Mm.
Chidimma, she was born and raised in South Africa.
Okay.
Her parents are Nigerian,
Okay.
and she became Miss Universe Africa and Oceania.
Wow.
But then things got a little complicated.
So she was actually the first runner-up in the Miss Universe pageant.
Wow.
Like a huge accomplishment.
Huge.
But she wanted to represent South Africa internationally, and
Wow.
she hit a roadblock.
What happened?
They denied her request
Oh, wow.
because of her Nigerian heritage.
Wow.
And then to make matters even more complicated,
Yeah.
there's now a legal investigation into her mother's residency status.
Really?
It's messy.
That's wild. Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
It really is.
For sure.
So, I mean, it is kind of a head-scratcher, isn't it?
Yeah.
South
Yeah.
Africa, a nation that fought against apartheid,
Right.
with the help of other African nations.
Yeah.
And now it seems like they're turning their back on a citizen because of her African roots.
Yeah. And to understand this reaction, we need to really think about.
Pan-African unity.
Okay.
This idea of solidarity, this shared identity among all African people.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually a huge driving force in the anti-apartheid movement.
Yeah.
Leaders like Nelson Mandela, they really championed this unity,
Yeah.
envisioning a continent that transcended like national borders.
Yeah. And I think he had that famous quote too, right?
Yeah.
Something about dreaming of an Africa
Yeah.
at peace with itself.
Exactly. I dream of an Africa which is in peace with itself.
Yes. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, but what we're seeing with Chidimma's case,
Yeah.
and unfortunately in other situations too,
Yeah.
is a rise in xenophobia.
Okay.
This fear or hostility towards foreigners,
Right.
particularly those from other African countries.
Okay.
And it's a stark contrast to those ideals of Pan-African unity.
So how do we reconcile those two things? It's like this legacy of fighting for freedom together,
Yeah.
but then we see these incidents that feel very exclusionary.
Right. It raises the question, is South Africa living up to its own history, to the ideals it once championed?
You have to wonder, if this rejection of Chidimma is tied to some like leftover colonial biases,
Right.
maybe a subconscious preference for European heritage over African heritage.
It's a question worth exploring for sure.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Would someone of European descent,
Okay.
born in France,
Right.
but living in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
face this same level of scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
based solely on like where their parents came from?
It's a good point.
Yeah,
It makes you think.
it challenges us to examine how deep-seated those colonial mindsets might still be, shaping perceptions of belonging in South Africa, even today.
Wow. It makes you wonder if those biases are lingering, even subtly.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for South Africa's role as like a leader in Africa?
It raises some serious concerns.
Yeah.
And if we look at it through the lens of Ubuntu,
Okay.
which is a philosophy that's central to a lot of African cultures,
Yeah.
that emphasizes shared humanity and interconnectedness,
Mm.
these acts of xenophobia directly contradict like its core principles.
Mhm. Okay, so we're starting to see how this controversy surrounding Chidimma's situation
Yeah,
goes way beyond her individual story.
definitely.
It's shining a light on these broader issues of xenophobia and prejudice.
Absolutely. And it has real-world consequences.
Yeah.
The Kilimanjaro News Network, which has been covering this story a lot,
Mhm.
has actually issued a really strong call to action.
Oh, wow.
They're demanding that the South African government
Okay.
intervene
Yeah.
in Chidimma's case,
Okay.
starting with that investigation into her mother's residency.
So they're basically saying, hold on, let's make sure things are fair here.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're also pushing for a formal apology
Oh, wow.
from the South African government.
Okay.
for how Chidimma's case has been handled so far.
Wow. So they're acknowledging that mistakes were made.
Yeah.
And what about those bigger issues we were talking about, like
Right.
xenophobia and the spirit of Ubuntu?
Yeah.
How does the Kilimanjaro News Network address that?
Well, they argue that South Africa needs to take concrete steps to really reaffirm its commitment to Pan-African unity.
Oh, okay.
It's about walking the walk,
Right.
not just talking the talk.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Okay.
This could involve things like policy changes,
Mm-hmm.
public awareness campaigns,
Okay.
and even educational initiatives
Right.
to combat xenophobia and promote intercultural understanding.
So it sounds like they're saying this situation needs to be a wake-up call.
Yes.
A moment for South Africa to really examine its actions and live up to its values.
Precisely. And they're not alone in this.
Okay.
There's a growing chorus of voices,
Yeah, okay.
both within South Africa
Yeah.
and across the continent,
Wow.
urging the nation to address this issue head on.
It makes you think, if something as straightforward as representing your country in a beauty pageant
Right.
can become this tangled web of heritage and belonging,
Yeah.
what does that say about the bigger picture of a unified Africa?
It really highlights the complexities of identity.
Yeah.
In a post-colonial world,
Mm-hmm.
even decades after the end of apartheid,
Yeah.
we're still wrestling with the legacies of colonialism,
Right.
the arbitrary borders that were drawn, the divisions that were sown.
It's like we're still trying to figure out how to reconcile those historical realities with the aspirations of a truly united and integrated Africa.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just South Africa.
Okay.
This case has actually sparked conversations
Yeah.
across the continent,
Wow.
with people drawing parallels to their own experiences of discrimination or exclusion
Right.
based on their ethnicity, nationality,
Yeah.
even regional differences.
I can imagine those conversations can get pretty heated,
Oh, yeah.
especially given the emotional weight of these issues.
They can be challenging, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that's also where the hope lies.
Yeah.
The fact that people are engaging in these discussions,
Mm-hmm.
questioning the status quo,
Yeah.
demanding better from their leaders,
Right.
that is a sign of progress.
Okay.
It shows that there's this desire for change,
Mm-hmm.
a yearning for a future
Yeah.
where those divisions are overcome.
So, coming back to Chidimma's situation,
Yeah.
what's the latest? Where do things stand now?
Well, the legal investigation into her mother's residency is still ongoing,
Okay.
and we haven't heard anything yet on whether South Africa will reconsider its stance on her representing the country.
Gotcha.
But the public discourse continues,
Yeah.
and I think that in itself is really significant.
It feels like this story has really struck a nerve, touched on something deeper than just a pageant dispute.
It has, and for good reason.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves,
Yeah.
about our societies, and the future we want to build in Africa.
And it also makes you wonder what Mandela would say about all this.
It's a question I've asked myself, too.
Yeah.
I think he would be really saddened by the xenophobia and discrimination
Yeah.
that we're seeing today. But I also think he would be encouraged by the resilience of the human spirit,
Yeah.
by the countless people and organizations working to promote understanding and build bridges
Yeah.
across communities.
It's that spirit of Ubuntu we were talking about earlier, that
Yeah.
sense of shared humanity that transcends borders and differences.
That's what gives me hope.
Yeah.
Even amid all these challenges,
Yeah.
the fact that this case has generated so much discussion, so much introspection, it suggests that people are hungry for change,
Yeah.
that they're not willing to just accept the status quo.
So even though this deep dive has definitely brought up some
Yeah.
heavy topics,
Mm-hmm.
there's also a glimmer of optimism there.
Yeah.
It feels like there's potential for growth, for learning,
Absolutely.
for creating a more just and equitable future.
I agree.
Yeah, I think so too.
This is a defining moment for South Africa
Yeah.
and for the whole continent, really.
Yeah.
The choices we make now, the actions we take, they will determine the course of our future.
It's a powerful reminder that building a unified Africa isn't just about
Right?
lofty ideals and grand pronouncements. It's about the everyday choices we make.
Yeah.
The way we treat each other,
Yeah.
the values we uphold.
It's about recognizing that our destinies are intertwined,
Yeah.
that we rise and fall together.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah,
It is.
it really is.
Yeah, it really is.
It really does feel like this whole situation is like a microcosm of these larger issues facing not just South Africa,
Right.
but the whole continent.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that achieving true unity in Africa,
Yeah.
it requires more than just political agreements
Right.
and economic cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
It demands a fundamental shift in mindsets,
Okay.
a genuine embrace of diversity,
Yeah.
and a willingness to confront the ghosts of the past.
It sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is.
But I mean, look at the progress that's been made.
That's true. Just a few decades ago, apartheid was still the law of the land in South Africa. To think how far they've come since then.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the negativity,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't lose sight of the progress.
Yeah.
And I think stories like Chidimma's,
Okay.
while challenging,
Yeah.
they can actually serve as catalysts for positive change.
Okay.
They force us to have those tough conversations,
Yes.
to examine our own biases, to hold our leaders accountable.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are your takeaways? What are some things that our listeners can reflect on based on what we've discussed?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the power of individual action.
Oh,
You know, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these issues,
right.
but each of us can make a difference.
Yeah.
We can start by educating ourselves
Okay.
about the history and cultures of other African countries,
Mm-hmm.
challenging xenophobic attitudes when we encounter them,
Yeah.
and supporting organizations that are working to promote Pan-African unity.
It's like that ripple effect, right?
Exactly.
Small actions can have a much wider impact
Yeah.
than we realize.
Absolutely. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a long and often messy process.
Mm-hmm.
But by staying engaged,
Yeah.
by having those tough conversations,
Right.
by working together,
Yeah.
we can move closer to that vision of a united and prosperous Africa.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's been a journey through history, politics, and some pretty weighty concepts.
for sure.
But ultimately, it's a story about people, about identity,
Yeah.
and about our shared future as Africans.
It's a story that's still being written,
Yeah.
and we all have a role to play in shaping its ending.
So to our listener out there, we leave you with this. How will you contribute to building a future where every African feels a sense of belonging and shared purpose?
Such a good question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
If heritage can overshadow birthplace and contribution
Yeah.
in defining national identity, what does that mean for the future of a unified Africa?
It's a big question.
It is a really big question.
It's a question that I think we need to keep asking
Yeah.
and keep grappling with.
Yeah, because, I mean, this whole situation with Chidimma, it
Yeah.
really does feel like just one example of
Yeah.
these, much larger issues that are facing not just South Africa,
Yeah.
but the entire continent.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the path towards a truly unified Africa,
Yeah,
it's going to be long
right.
and it's going to be complex.
That was going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be easy, but the
Yeah.
conversations that we're having,
Yeah.
the awareness that's being raised,
Mhm.
these are crucial steps in the right direction.
I agree. So thank you so much for lending your expertise to this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time.